Podcast City.
Get on it.
Podcast City.
Get on.
Yeah, get up and get on it. We are back in the saddle again. As this podcast gets popular and popular episode by episode, tonight is number 3. Black and white and what is right. Can we beat the hate is the essential. What we're going to kick it off with tonight. I am honored to have my man Peter Sylvia in the building with me, and Marvin Bonds, his friend from Providence. And yes, for you hoopers out there, I know there's a lot of you, he is related to the Marvin Bonds. But we are here to talk not about basketball tonight, okay? I'm sure we have some fun talking about that, and I can't wait to start doing it again. But we have much, much more serious stuff on the table. And like I said in every podcast, this conversation is not for amateurs. It's not for juveniles. It is very, very serious. Because let me tell you one thing right now. I'm not worried about country. I'm not worried about China killing this country, or Russia, or any Muslim terrorist, or anything like that. Any external international threat with military might, I am not worried about at all. But I am worried about this country rotting from its core. I am the United States of America turning into the divided States of America, and I'm worried about that. I'm worried about race and geographical preferences and differences and jealousies and hatreds that have been boiling under the surface in this country for far, far, far too long. We are much closer to defeating ourselves than any of the enemies internationally that we've been brainwashed to hate. Let's get that straight right now. Okay? Throughout the country, protest. Throughout the country, things moving. Talks of defunding police. We're going to get into that more. Talks about Black Lives Matter. Talk about social justice. Talk about the inequalities. And the movement is spreading. Let me ask you this question, Marvin. Why now? Hold on. Why not Eric Garner, the man who was choked to death by New York Police Department over some minor, insignificant stuff when it matters? Why not when Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were doing their thing? Why not Rodney King? Why not the Watts riots? Why does it feel different now?
I think the reality is that these are overwhelming numbers of those cases that you just mentioned.
Sure.
Right. So I think people have seen it enough times where they're at a point now where it's like enough is enough.
Sure.
You know, every time one of these incidents has happened from the 60s on
Yeah.
to where we're at now, there are protests, there are riots,
Sure.
And people speak out against the injustices and
Yeah.
the police brutality.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the protests usually die out after a month.
Why? Tell me why.
I think there's always something else that comes along to draw people's attention. And the media is good at spinning the narrative, you know, instead of focusing on the issue.
Right now, I think they're doing a better job of ever, the social justice movement, of controlling the narrative. More than ever.
Well, not necessarily, because if you look at where we're at, most of the narratives is about the looting and the rioting, right?
Sure. I said that episode 1 2 weeks ago, but I think that's changing. I think that what I'm watching now, I'm hearing a lot more about legislation. Mm-hmm. I'm hearing a lot more about police reform.
Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot more about the protests being more peaceful now. Yeah, I said that in show number 1. I said, listen, these looters and rioters are stealing it. They're stealing segments and blocks of television time from the righteous cause of police reform and social justice. Right. I think it's getting a little better. And, you know, because I watch the news. I have a political background. I worked for the DNC for 4 years. My father was a state legislator. I understand how to influence people. And when I saw the focus of going about the looters and rioters, I got bummed out. Because we know it's not the majority.
Right.
Okay? You know, we know it's the underbelly, you know. But then people say, well, there's never been real change without real violence and real riot.
True.
And there's a lot of arguments. And we're here to talk about them all. You know what I mean? And what we believe in and what we don't. Peter, let me ask you a question. Do you think that the protest music has control of the narrative now, or you think a lot of it's still being focused on the looters and the protesters?
It depends on the station you listen to. You know, it really does.
Really?
It really does.
Yeah.
You know, the stations that you listen to that are to the far, you know, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be showing all the looting. They're going to be showing Seattle.
Yeah.
They're going to be showing Seattle. They're going to be showing, you know, different things. But, you know, in reality, you know, most of these protests are peaceful. You know, most of the police officers will tell you that during the protests, until people start going home, you know, when the protest is over, that's when the looting and the rioting starts. Sure. When the underbelly starts to get a hold of it. But before that, the protests have been policing themselves. They've been putting themselves in front of people's
properties. Good.
They've been standing in front of properties, and they've been telling people
that's a hero to me.
You're not going to do this.
That is a hero to me. Somebody who caught up in a moment with all that energy and still has the grounded right and fundamentals in their belly to say, hey, wait a minute, man, this is fucking wrong here, man. Like this is a small business. You know, black, white, yellow. You know, this family's got 60, 70 years of generations of family members that have worked to make this. You know, this is not our problem. You know, and I think that takes a lot of courage, because isn't there something about getting caught up in like the rioters and protest mentality? They've talked about it in court, like people just getting caught up in the mayhem.
But that's part of the illusion that the media puts on things to draw you away from the real topic. You reverse back to Colin Kaepernick. You don't get more peaceful than just taking a knee.
Sure.
But that narrative,
and it's actually respectful to the people who serve in our armed forces.
And that narrative,
and it was recommended that that's how he protested.
Exactly, by somebody else, not himself.
Absolutely.
And that narrative was spun to, whoa, this is disrespectful to the flag. It's disrespectful for the troops. Anything and everything to draw attention away from the real core problem, and that's what the media's job is. And that's why things don't get changed, because people are easily influenced by that.
But let me ask you a question. Can you understand? I am a liberal Democrat, okay? During this show and also sometimes I got to bring up the counter argument. And I'm going to do it right now, okay? I believe, most importantly, our rights and our civil rights and civil liberties are best when they're tested, okay? Do I think the KKK should walk in down Main Street, USA, and have a permit to go into a parade? No, it makes me sick.
Still happens.
But they do.
Still happens.
Okay? Do I think the LGBTQ movement should be allowed to march in South Boston? Absolutely. I think they do. These rights that we have, okay, when they're challenged, they need to be reinforced. But it doesn't make it right, or it doesn't make it my cup of tea, and it doesn't make it my perspective on things. But we are a nation of unalienable rights. Okay?
Allegedly.
We are, but that's our Constitution. That's the Bill of Rights, and nothing is perfect. Nothing goes according to plan. Nothing stays scripted. There isn't a thing in this world that doesn't have its underbelly and its warts that gets exposed. But this country, okay, people love it because of our freedoms and our personal freedoms and our personal rights. And okay, while I find stuff offensive, and you talked about the First Amendment and a few other things, are you suggesting that they make changes to some of that Constitution? Or
well, I don't think I mean, George Bush said the Constitution is nothing but a piece of paper, right?
Yeah.
So,
But it is.
that's what he said. That's
what
what the President of the United States said. I'm not saying. I'm just saying that's what George Bush said.
Yeah.
So, in reality, what does the Constitution really? How much power does it hold when you're out on the street doing something that the Constitution provides you the right to do, and the law enforcement says no, you're not going to be able to do that?
Absolutely. In theory and practice, we've learned sadly can be two different things.
Exactly.
If you watch the protests, and if you watch the protests, there's a difference between big difference between a white supremacist protest and the Black Lives Matter protest.
Huge.
You know what the big difference is?
Tell me.
Protection.
The police stand side by side with the white supremacists and walk that street
Protect them.
with them, side by side. You don't see the police walking with Black Lives Matter. No, you don't.
Yeah.
You watch. I've been watching videos after videos after videos. The police, and anywhere that they go, they're lockstep in line with the white supremacists. But we don't see that. So how is it supposed to be? You know, the First Amendment is supposed to be. Yeah, we can do it, but we're not going to be protected. That's how Antifa was started, right? I started like.
I still think the core of America finds the KKK repulsive, and they would be. I mean, let me break it down to like let's take 100 white Americans. How many of them out of 100 do you think find the KKK repulsive? I do.
How many?
Out of 100. I mean, is it 20% that may have a little tinge of, racism in them that may that may blah blah blah.
But to be politically correct, somebody might say yes, but internally feel completely different.
But that's what I'm asking you. As a black man in America, 100 white people, how many of them do not find the KKK absolutely repulsive?
I wouldn't say it would be a high percentage because you still have people that were former KKK members who are part of government, who are part of police forces, like high-level ranking officials in the military.
We have former legal immigrants that are. We have lots of people.
So how repulsive do people find it to be when they elect these people into office and promote them to positions, knowing that history?
Well, they're not getting elected in New York. They're not getting elected in Philly. They're not getting elected in L.A. They're not getting elected in Detroit. They're not getting elected in urban centers.
Well, that's urban centers, but those people are not the majority of the votes that you're getting in the polls either.
No, the urban centers dominate the polls.
I thought you meant urban communities.
Urban communities, will be the difference maker for the Democratic Party.
The big difference makers are the senators that are voted that are blatantly racist, and they still keep voted back in because that's their community. That's their community, and they are in leadership positions.
Sure.
Now, when you have like a Mitch McConnell who's in a leadership position and he refuses to bring anything to the Senate, come on, you don't think there's something haywire there?
Can we beat the hate? That's topic number one. How do we beat it? Do we beat it? Does the social justice movement take us over the top? Is this going to be the one that tips it over? Is it going to come from reparations? Is it going to come from legislation? Is it going to come from education? Is it going to come from laws? How do we do it?
It's a simple answer.
Tell me. Whoa, really?
Yes.
Really? Then what are you doing here? If it's that simple, how come you're not in Congress? How come you're not running the Smithsonian Institute or something?
People in Congress don't want
the Southern Poverty Law Center.
People in Congress don't want simple answers. They like ambiguous answers that they can sway one way or the other when they want to.
Yes, okay.
But the simple answer is real simple. That there's no love in this world, right? There's no more love thy neighbor as thyself. There's no more.
I love my neighbor.
You might be a small minority of people that feel that.
I disagree.
But let me say this, right?
There's a silent majority out there.
Silent, that's the problem.
Okay.
And we're talking about people who are trained and conditioned to mind your own business, don't get involved in certain things if it doesn't affect you.
Sure.
Cancer's not a
like them 4 cops that watch a guy get choked.
Yeah, cancer's not a reality to you until somebody in your family gets it, or somebody you know gets it. So the problem is there's no love in the world, and every man for himself. That's the mentality that we have now.
I don't see that though.
If you,
I don't see that. I was raised by liberal Democrats. My parents were protesters. Don't tread on me. Nuclear proposal.
But that's for something other. That's not. people caring about people. That's people caring about something.
My father was a social worker. My father was a liberal politician who voted for food stamps and pre-K.
Those are programs.
Don't dismiss that.
Those are programs. I'm talking about
programs that your people and my people need.
Perhaps.
Right.
Perhaps.
Pre-K is critical to the sex. If you look at the numbers, critical to sex. Politicians fund that, and they take a break. And every EBT card we see out there, and every subsidized housing. I lived in the projects. My parents, when I was 17 years old, my father was a social worker, long before DYS and DSS.
But if people
and
don't
he didn't
care,
have a register bone in his body.
But if people don't generally have a love for their fellow man, then how do you change anything? If you look at somebody and say, well, it's not happening to me, it's not my issue, so I'm not going to get involved. I don't like corruption or hatred of any sort against any group of people. Doesn't matter if they're black, white, Asian, that doesn't matter. But in general, we're taught to just stick to what affects you, stick to your own kind, don't get involved in other people's affairs and other people's business, right? Because when you look at the looting and all that stuff now, anytime you see it on TV, what are they showing? Dark-skinned people doing the things, but we know that's not the reality. No. But that's the narrative that's being spun. So people see what they want, and then they gravitate to what they want to gravitate to. And they don't care about other people's plights.
During the Rodney King riots, there was an issue about the primarily black protests burning down black-owned and operated businesses. Okay?
But I don't think there's that many.
And, what do we got going on, man?
I just want to switch the mic.
All right, I'm going to switch that mic up. Okay. So, we talked about...
You were saying about the riots
in L.A. There was a lot of blowback because of that, right? They said, why not do it in Beverly Hills? That was... They ain't getting to Beverly Hills. They're going to get shot before they get there. You understand? So, I think you have to be... Pete, if you could turn me down just a little bit. Milton was working his ass off for us.
Yes, good job.
Not much better. I just think this is so critical that I think that the people who are leading this movement, I think that they may be closer to the finish line than they've ever been. You hear just the discussions, just like Peter talked about it, the quality of image on George Floyd and the police watching and the biracial people complaining about what had happened. I had heard white people who I struggle with trying to move their meter a little bit and shut off Fox and stop the nonsense. And not every immigrant is bad. We have a bad problem in this country, not just with race, but vilifying the first generation immigrants that live in our country and who have built it. Like the Irish were vilified. The Portuguese, we've seen it.
Yes.
The Muslims are now. The Cambodians. You see it in gateway cities like Fort New Bedford and Providence and other places. And we talked about the socio-economic thing a little bit last time. We're going to get into it a little bit. Okay? But I think we're real close to having real reform. And real reform starts with laws, okay? It starts with education. It starts with throwing the old playbook out and bringing a whole nother one in. And I think we're close enough.
You're seeing...
I'm sorry.
Let's get Peter. Come on, Pete.
You're seeing a lot more unity. I think there's more and more unity amongst all the races and seeing injustices.
Sure.
Now, the biggest thing we had is our cell phones. Everybody's recording everything. So everybody's seeing, not just in California, in San Diego, or down south or whatever. They're seeing the same pictures. And this president...
They don't have to wait 24 hours for the newspaper to come again. They don't have to wait for Walter Cronkite at 6 because we got news,
And the tweeter-in-chief, the tweeter-in-chief is making it 10 times harder because he's not helping this situation. He's making the situation worse.
Does Donald Trump understand that, and the Republicans, do they really understand that the days of this being a white-dominated country from a population point of view are limited? That this country isn't getting any more white; it's getting more brown. I mean, do they really have a command on that? I know corporate America does.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I know people that are selling stuff, and I know people that are servicing it, and I know they know. I mean, when you look at the numbers, okay, how many Eastern European or Western European immigrants coming to America today? Not many. Not many. Okay, our immigrant flow is coming from South and Central America for the most part. Okay, and those people are brown.
Yeah.
Those people aren't going to put on ice skates to play hockey. They're going to play soccer. Buy soccer. Okay, you know buy the foods that they eat. Their spending habits. Their focus. You know what's going on. I mean, we're not getting any more white.
No, but as you can see, I mean,
Yeah.
I would take a step back and say most are coming from down south because they're not. Most of the people that are coming here from Asia, from Europe, but they're coming here on planes because they can afford it.
Yeah.
And what they're doing.
Yeah, but I don't think the legal immigrant is coming from Asia or Europe. No, I think that they're leaving the oppression and the poverty and the narco states of Central and South America. And I just watched a thing on a journey where some woman and a kid walked 365 miles.
Yeah, they're doing that. They're
in this
doing
country.
that, but under legal immigration,
Sure.
the government is only taking so many people from those countries. They're only taking so many people from those countries. So they, say if they say, hey, you have to, if Europe sends 10,000 people, we're gonna let 9,500 in, and we're only gonna let 9,500.
Sure.
From
But I'm talking about illegal immigrants. I'm talking about people who get the American dream. Okay, who get here somehow, some way, whether it's through a tunnel, through a smuggler, through a coyote, who get here and get to California or get to Arizona, New Mexico, or Texas, and assimilate into their society, and eventually will send their kids to college. I mean, if you look at the crime history of illegal immigrants, it's like a third of what American citizens commit.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And we have a bad history of vilifying that. I mean, I remember the word greenhorn. Do you remember it? That was fighting.
I still hear greenhorn.
On Bedford Street. But it's a term of endearment now. It does not have the sting that it once did. On Bedford Street in Fall River, in the Spirit of Santo or Santa Cristo, if you said greenhorn, Milton, that was a problem. Okay? It was a big, big, big problem. And we have a bad habit of doing that. I also think that it's a socioeconomic issue as well. So we talked, I used the example about 4 kids from Fall River in a car getting pulled over in Somerset or Swansea. It's guns out. Where's the drugs? What are you doing here? Boom. You know what I mean? I think there's a socioeconomic element to social justice as well, too. Do you agree, Marvin?
100%. 100%, yeah. And that happens, especially if you're in an area that somebody doesn't, not just a drug-infested area.
Sure, yeah.
But if you're in a wealthy area,
of course,
and somebody doesn't believe or think you belong there because of how you look,
of course, how you talk, yeah, of course.
So absolutely, and you said something about reform,
yeah,
and you don't get reform until you get accountability.
Sure.
Without accountability, you can't have reform. So
sure.
If you want to,
so tell me how we get the accountability.
Well, you just. Okay, so there's a thin line between policy and right and wrong. Right?
Sure.
So you see what happened to George Floyd.
Sure. Yeah.
And that was so egregious that people said, we don't care what your policy says. Because the police department came out and said the officer was well within his right to do what he did.
I think, and I told most people, the biggest problem in police departments are police lying for other police and justifying other police. We call it the blue line, right? That's what it's called?
Yeah, it's the thin blue line, yes.
Yeah.
But honestly, I haven't seen anybody say that, aside from that police department, said he did the right thing, because any training manual does not say to put your knees on his neck.
Sure.
None.
But the training manual and the testimony freed those cops who did it to Rodney King.
Correct.
Yes.
Because-
You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're saying.
That
You know what I mean? Yeah, policy,
versus what's right
humanity.
and wrong in law
Yeah,
is different.
of course.
You know, so if you kill a guy,
Yeah.
you murder a man, because that's what we saw, right?
Yeah.
You murder a man, they'll tell you that's against the law. You can't do that.
Yeah.
But if it's within our policy to do that, then we're not guilty of the law all of a sudden.
Sure.
Which doesn't make sense to me, because murder is murder no matter if you
The
did it.
law of right and wrong should supersede the policy,
There you go.
I believe.
Plain and simple.
Do you agree?
I agree, 100%.
Defunding police. You had a very interesting take on that, okay? People get confused with defunding police, okay? Like it is, we're going to eliminate police departments. Can you please explain what defunding police is, Marvin?
Yeah, defunding the police is just a simple term that means taking away some of their financial resources. They get a huge cut of the state's money or the budget,
Yeah.
and really they don't need it. You know, most of these police departments are well prepared, well militarized, if you
Sure,
will, right?
yeah.
And they all that money is going in, and they don't need all that money. They don't use a lot of it on training, obviously. Annual training.
Sure.
You know, so you go through your, and Pete knows better than me.
Yeah.
You go through your academy, you do all of that stuff, and then all of a sudden, that's it. You know, there's no more real training until something happens where it has to force you to get back.
Yeah.
So defunding the police just means taking away those resources and allocating that money into a different area, maybe social services or health and
Mental health.
No, that's exactly what you asked, because your last word summed it up. It's not defunding the police. It's reallocating the police
Sure,
funds. They're not defunding them. Nobody's going to defund the police to where, where the police departments aren't going to be funded by the
Sure.
federal government or state government or the local government. It's a reallocation of funds.
More data, more
Yes.
numbers, more cameras, more patrolling social media. There's going to be the 21st century policing.
Right.
If you listen to the guy from New York City, okay, who doesn't have the best history either, but okay, was articulate enough to say this is the 21st century. Gone are the smash and grab, head banging days of rolling up on somebody who you believe to be, boom, and doing it the new NYPD way.
But that's where accountability
Okay.
comes in.
Yeah,
Right? Because
sure.
if those elements are still going to be within your organizations, right?
Yep.
Because they're not going to just go in there and fire everybody.
Yep.
It's not going to happen. So in order for those people to be weeded out, if you will, rooted out, there'll have to be complaints made, and those complaints need to go into a different direction. So my idea, thinking about this, was you have a community
Review board? Sure.
that the complaints go to, as well as the police department, so they're both keeping a record.
Every city has one, but they're all hacks that are on it.
You know the
for the
reason-
most part, you need real activists,
Real
And
people, exactly.
but also ex-cops and ex-teachers and ex-coaches. You know, I think, and I talked this with Peter. I always thought with the police was this. Okay, there should be some type of social work, some type of coaching, some type of teaching component for a couple of years. That should be a mandate before they get the job.
Well, somebody made a good point. They said it took me 2 years to become a hairdresser and 6
Yes.
years to become a player. So, you're giving somebody with so much power and authority a 6 months window of training and the hiring process, but somebody else who wants to be a hairdresser has to do 2 years of school and be recertified every single year.
We have 1 8-hour day of recertification every year.
Yeah.
Every police department, every law enforcement has 1 day. Not 3 days, not 4 days, not 5 days, but 1 day.
Professional training.
1 day.
Yeah.
And what do we learn? The same stuff that we already learned. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe the CPR class changed. But listen, we're in a different day and age. A lot of stuff needs to be taught. A lot of different things need to be taught. Like we were talking like last week.
Yeah.
There's some words that mean a lot to our community.
Sure.
That may not mean that much to
Sure.
somebody else's community. You know what I mean? And you got to teach some of these officers. You know, you can't be going around and
Using the word boy.
whispering the boy in somebody's ear, especially down south.
Or telling people to get on their knees.
Yes, get on your
Well,
knees.
I mean, I asked somebody the other day, it says confusing to me. When a guy's sitting in his car, they want you to stand up. And when you're standing up, they tell you to sit down. So it doesn't really make sense. If somebody's sitting in their car, I think they're less dangerous because they're in a vulnerable position than if they're on their feet.
I just read a story. I mean, you probably heard of the same one. The police commissioner of Detroit, of urban Detroit, police commissioner of the whole city, said that he was in an unmarked car, driving down the road, doing everything he's supposed to, and he got stopped by an officer.
Yeah.
A white officer.
The Republicans' black senator, who they put out in front for the Republicans when they talked about this wrong, got pulled over like 30-something times in like 2-3 months.
Yes. And he says, "Officer, why are you stopping me?" He goes, "You fit the description of a robbery suspect." He says, "Oh, really?" And then he shows him that he's a police commissioner, and the guy was all, "Oh, see you later, sir."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
So how do you change that culture?
It's got to come. Like, we can send them to great schools and have great seminars and get training the best, but I'm a believer of change comes from within. You're gonna have strong lieutenants, captains, chiefs who absolutely forbid this old school smash and grab, Giuliani type style of in-your-face policing.
But also, that's where that accountability comes in.
Sure.
If you don't hold the people who are the most egregious offenders accountable, what's stopping them off the next guy coming under them from doing the same and repeating that same activity?
What about the cops saying, man, we're stressed out. We're going to murders. We're going to drug overdoses. We're going here. We're going there. But, people are walking on the other side of the street from us. People are looking at us like we're funny. Do you have any empathy for that job?
Well, I think you have to have empathy for a lot of jobs. Doctors and, school teachers and school bus drivers.
Sure. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you chose that profession.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So...
but their suicide rate is higher. Their addiction rate is higher than most. The divorce rate, all of the equality for quality of life stuff. They don't usually carry a strong quality of life. But like you said, when the DeForva releases its top 100 paid city employees, like out of the 30 people, most of them, with the overtime, most of them are police officers.
yeah, but they're busting their butts. They're working many hours, like 80 extra hours a week on top of their 40.
Sure.
They're working.
Is that a problem? Is that a problem? Should they be working? I've talked to a lot of people who said that maybe they should be allowed to do that. I don't think because that would make them more anxious
You know what?
and more afraid.
You know what the thing is? I'm going to be honest because I was there. I was there. Back when I first started in 2003, when I got into the department, Taunton Hospital was open. All these mental institutions were open.
Sure.
It's closing down all these mental health facilities, closing down these addiction facilities, closing down all these things that supposedly help people. That now you're making a police officer, a counselor.
Sure.
You're making them. They're making them a psychiatrist.
Sure.
We're doing.
Why
all
are
the jobs.
police going to overdose calls?
They shouldn't be.
They shouldn't be there.
No.
That's an EMT thing.
it should be
Or a suicide call. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Usually you have it's three. It's an ambulance goes there. The police officer is the first one on site, and the fire department. So you're having three separate.
I saw a sheet with like 12 to 50% of their things were drug related overdoses and stuff.
We're paying. Believe it or not, we're paying 3 different departments to go to one call to which one agency can take care of that problem. If an EMT if they sent the AMTs to overdoses, but what it is when you have an overdose, you usually have drugs involved. So police have to be involved. And then when you have a substance like fentanyl, the fire department has to be involved. So you do have to have the 3 departments there at one time. But the thing is that, they really are under a lot of stress because first of all, most police departments, why are the police departments getting so underpaid to where they have to do these overtime and details and all this stuff? I mean, most officers, you first start there, you're risking your life. What person in this room or outside would risk their life at a base salary of $31,000 a year?
No.
None.
We should cut the overtime.
$40,000 a year, would that be
Not
enough?
cut-
No. Risking your life. Everybody, a police officer really does have a really hard job. They chose that job.
Yeah, but systematically, like Marvin said here, right? It takes 2 years to be a hairdresser. It takes 6 months to be a police officer.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So,
Yes.
so I think that reform has to be from top to bottom. But until
It's shared. It has to be a shared reform.
Absolutely.
It has to be
Sure.
a community reform. Now, if your community is 80% African American, those people that are doing that should be the same amount of equal the same amount of people that are in their community. Am I right, Marvin?
Yeah, absolutely. How about this too?
a black cop's more black or more blue?
Well, I was gonna say in Ferguson you had an 88%
Yeah.
minority
Population.
population,
Sure.
and like what was like a 1%
That's correct. Yeah,
representation
sure,
on
sure.
the police department.
Absolutely.
And that's how most of the police departments are. There's not a lot of
People of
equal
color,
opportunity going on there, and then
Are quality young black people being denied, or they're just not interested because they look at them as the enemy?
probably both.
It's
Probably
both.
Yeah.
It's both. I can guarantee you this. It's both.
Yeah.
It's both.
Sure.
When somebody says,
It usually
when
is.
Somebody says to you, right?
Yeah.
You know me. You know me most of my life.
Yeah.
You know me now.
Yeah.
Okay. Peter Sylvia is on paperwork. He's
Yeah.
coming to do this interview. What are you assuming?
You're Portuguese.
He's a Portuguese guy to coming to do this thing. Dana Sylvia, who's was Marvin's complexion, right? My brother. He's coming. Dana Sylvia. Oh, I'm gonna, Andre Sylvia. John Sylvia, Joe Sylvia, anybody. You're gonna automatically look at the application. They look at the applications, and don't tell me that they don't have a prerequisite or a predetermined. When they look
Idea
at
what they're-
idea of it. If
But we're being told that they're aggressively looking to hire females, minorities, and people of color.
some departments,
Yeah.
some departments. Hey, listen, some departments have to fill their quota.
Yeah.
Plus,
Are quotas a bad thing? Are racial quotas for municipality and city jobs, is that a bad thing?
I think that's the wrong question to ask. I think the question to ask is why.
Listen,
why
let
do
me
they
tell you
have-
something right now.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect, man.
No.
Yeah.
Why do they
I'm firing, so tell me.
The question to ask is why do they have quotas in the first place? What would the departments look like if they didn't?
Again, okay, with the quota situation, I think I think there needs to be a socioeconomic component into it as well. I don't think it should be all about color.
No.
I think a kid going to an underperforming school, an underperforming elementary school, an underperforming middle school, an underperforming high school, growing up in abject poverty, surrounded by crime and drugs, okay, white or black, are very, very similar, unfortunately.
I'm sure Marvin could attest to this. You went to LaSalle,
Right.
Sure.
right? You got a good education by going to LaSalle, would you say?
Yeah.
Now, you grew up with some guys in your own neighborhood
Yep.
that couldn't go to LaSalle.
Correct.
They didn't get the same education as you,
No.
right?
No.
Same color, same
And by,
same background.
and by going to those type of institutions, my school was like 85% Italian.
Yeah, of course.
So you're meeting different people who are going to become the police officers, the
Yeah.
mayors, the judges,
Sure,
and so
yeah.
on and so forth. So it gives you that network that you may not have coming from inner city.
Absolutely.
So I mean that's an issue as well.
Let's switch gears here for a sec. Okay, so reparations. Are you yes or no?
What kind of reparations we talking?
We're just talking about reparations, man. We're not looking to win a Pulitzer.
Financial?
We're not looking to win a Pulitzer Prize here tonight, my man. You know what I mean? But is the change going to come from reparations and then we go our own ways? Is it going to come from legislation like it did in the 60s, which, even though it was passed, took a long time to put into place in real, as we talked about earlier, in real time, in real place? Does it come from education? Because I think when I look at this movement, okay, I think the parents of these millennials did a better job at raising their kids not to see color as much. Because let's face it, this is young people Well, that's the engine
They
for
do,
this movement.
They do, because we have a lot more than in the past. A lot more mixed couples and mixed races that coming together.
Yeah.
You know,
The march in Selma, there was 33% white people.
Right.
At that march.
Yeah, but you gotta understand, like even in the city here and stuff, there was blatant racism out there until some of these fathers and grandfathers started getting African American grandchildren and stuff. It was bad back in the day. You lived it.
It's tough to in the communities it was tough everywhere. But I always thought that Foreman did a better job of it. I think the sports element and the pride in the high school at the time, not like it is today. I'm talking about when there was a real lot to be proud of. Right. You know what I mean? And the fact that we were underdogs. And the fact that, our parents didn't work in Brookline and they didn't work in, the technology belt. They worked in the mills and the factories and the other places. I thought that we did a nice job of assimilating that.
No, you say,
but clearly, the younger generation, it's less. Like you said, there's more mixed race couples. Right. The music, the fashion, the control of the urban entrepreneur, okay, you got these kids right by the balls.
Mike, could I just go back to where you said reparations? And I don't know if Marvin answered it. The reparations, I think you agreed to a certain extent.
That reparations will help?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? I think that's a broad question, so you'd have to kind of break it down on what... Me,
myself, is if you can prove, this is just me, if you can prove that you descended from slavery, why not give them what they were promised in the first place?
40 acres of a meal.
Why not give the families of slaves what they were promised in the first place?
But let me take your argument for a second, Peter. But okay, so what if your family wasn't? They weren't slaves, right? But what if they went to shitty schools? And what if they lived in crime-infested areas? Because of this is where we cluster them. If you look at Cabrini Green in Chicago, whoever the social engineer for that, are you familiar with Cabrini Green? No. It was the most notorious housing project in the country. Yeah. A stone's throw away from where Michael Jordan played for the Chicago Bulls. Okay. It was like 15 buildings, 25 floors up, poverty on top of poverty, and stacking them, on top of one another. And the social engineering then creating these huge products in these huge neighborhoods of subsidized housing, one on top of another. You cannot put poor people on top of poor people. You know what I mean? It's a recipe. I don't care what color they are. It's a recipe for disaster. Yeah. Okay?
Well, you're not going to be, honestly, you're not going to be able to put any kind of, housing project or houses near rich people.
Well, that's not true, because there's one in Florida. There's two in Florida. There's one in the Highlands, Pleasant View, and there is 40th Street where I lived, which is in New Boston Road, which is the second best neighborhood in Florida. And a lot of those kids that have come from Pleasant View, because they go to the unfortunately they go to the better schools. Bobby Bailey, a lot of kids that I mentored, because they went to Spencer Borden, which is the most requested elementary school, because they went to Morton, which was the best elementary school, and then they went to Durfee, which was a 30-second walk from the house. If you look at the kids that grew up there, and it's not a mega project, it is 9 to 10 buildings with row housing, with maybe 60, 70 families.
I'm not so much talking about a project. I'm talking about Rosewood. I'm talking about Tulsa. Yeah. I'm talking about neighborhoods that were houses that people can feel good about themselves.
South Central's all houses. You don't find many projects there at all. It looks like paradise.
Right, because it does look like paradise. But give somebody something that means something. You put a bunch of rats or something like that in a small thing. They're gonna eat themselves out of that home. You know what I mean? You give them something of value, like a house. We sit here and we build houses for we build houses for the less fortunate, all the time.
Habitat for Humanity for veterans.
Okay.
Warwick Dunn does it for single mothers,
Right.
which is amazing.
We did. American Indians got the casinos. They got reservations. They got casinos. They're never taxed and everything. You promise
Life on a reservation is far from glamorous.
You
Peter.
no, it's not. Yeah,
Far from
but
glamorous.
that's what I'm saying.
Sure.
You promise something to a certain race of people or that were enslaved. You promised something to them and just took it away. Just took it away. So I just don't understand it. How could
The greatest race argument was made by a professor from me in North Carolina saying, let me tell you something. You talk about reparations, you talk about schools, separate but equal, Brown versus Board. You go on and on and on, right? But let me put an analogy that most understand, okay? How do you start a race and give one team a 80-year head start
Yes.
and expect
Yes.
them to be
catch up,
equal?
isn't it?
You know what I mean? All right, let's talk about Southern culture. Let's talk about the flag. Let's talk about the statues. And let's talk about cleansing history, which a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement is done. Let's face it. Our history, like many others, great societies, the UK, the Far East, okay, is not a fairy tale in a storybook. Some of the greatest Americans in this history that fought for this country had slaves.
Right.
Most of them were sneaking out the back door and, having their way with black women who were slaves or housekeepers or whatever they may have been in that capacity. Do we try to cleanse our history, or do we say, hey, listen, our history is a lesson in life. It's never going to be perfect, but we always got to try to be better. I mean, do we take down Abe Lincoln? I mean, do we take down George Washington's monument? I mean, what do we do about Monticello and Thomas Jefferson? I mean, these are men who wrote our laws, who fought, who were labeled terrorists and labeled revolutionaries and labeled rioters and looters. Remember the Tea Party?
Yes.
Okay? They were dressed as Indians. They were dressed as patriots. Okay? And they were called rioters and looters
Exactly.
and revolutionaries. At what point, where do we, if we're going to cleanse our history and get rid of a bad guy like Columbus, right? He's the enemy, a prime memory of this new social justice movement. Like, where do we stop? Where does it end?
I don't think you can cleanse history. History is what it is.
Sure.
And I don't think you can eliminate history, because if you don't understand history, you'll make the same.
You'll be doomed to repeat it.
mistakes
Sure,
in
absolutely.
The future.
Yeah.
I think the problem is most of the young people don't know history.
Sure.
They don't study or research history.
So should a statue of Robert E. Lee in Richmond, Virginia, be removed?
If Robert E. Lee's statue represents oppression and is offensive,
Well, no, he was the head of the Confederate Army.
I'm saying
Yeah.
if it represents that to some people,
Sure.
a whole group of people, and it's offensive,
Sure.
then why would you want it to be erected? Why not?
Because I'm asking you, when do we stop cleaning history? So Washington was a slaveholder. Do we take down the Washington Monument?
I don't know if it's cleaning history or more so stop trying to make heroes out of bad men.
Okay, but they have these massive monuments. We have the Washington Monument. Is George Washington a bad man for having slaves?
I think anybody who has slaves is a bad man.
Okay, Peter.
I do too. I think that anybody that has had slaves is a bad man. Their moral character wasn't in line with the teaching of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
It's simple as that. The thing is, hey, you take down the monument and put them where it belongs, in a museum. Where we learn most of our things, we don't learn them from that monument.
Yeah.
We learn from books, and we learn them from museums.
You guys realize what you just said, that the father of our country, George Washington, was a bad man.
No, I will.
And I listen, and I put it out there. I put it out there.
Let me put it to you this way.
All right. Okay.
Let me put it to you this way.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. If years go by, you guys know me as Peter.
Yeah.
You find out that I used to beat my wife, beat my children,
Yeah.
do bad things things. Would you want the my stuff to be posted up there?
Sure.
and-
Okay. But who do you want? General Patton did that. But who do you want fighting the Third Reich and the Nazis? Do you want General Patton or some cream puff who's out of West Point?
I really don't.
I mean, in war.
I'm not. We're talking about fighting for the country, which everybody should fight for our country. and stuff like that.
No. We're talking about the people that led the fight.
Yeah, I understand that, but we're
Well,
talking
most
about
of
the
people that led
differences.
fight were Africans.
What?
Most people that led those wars were African American people that did that.
Led the Revolutionary War?
Led the wars. They were the front line in a lot of wars that America fought.
Yeah.
And against their
Not necessarily Revolutionary War, though.
Well, I'm not talking
Crispus Attucks was involved in the Boston Massacre. He was the first African American shot. We all know that. There were some that fought for the British. There were some that fought for the revolutionaries. It was like what pre-existing relationships did they have first? If you really do a deep dive into the Revolutionary War.
Your question is,
Sure.
are these people bad men?
No, my question is, when do we stop with the sanitizing of history? Well, this is what I'm getting to, fellas. Okay? There's a teaching point here that none of us are the most righteous.
Right.
None of us are perfect. Okay? That even George Washington made decisions that didn't reflect well on his character. Okay? And was that the way the times were? Was he raised to be that way? Okay? Was the culture so strong and so embedded that he couldn't escape it as a young man? No. There's no secret that Great Britain was a little more enlightened than we were and stopped slavery, I believe, 40 or 50 years before this country did.
Yes.
Okay? At one point, do we have to say the making of this great country, who has many warts and many flaws, okay, didn't come from perfect men. Okay? And I haven't met a son of a bitch that's been perfect yet.
Only one.
I don't.
And they nailed his ass to the cross.
And they vilified him and crucified him.
Hey, I don't. Listen. Any man that owns slaves is a man that owns slaves as animals. You know, you own them just they were
Some were treated much better than others.
They were
some of us, were conditioned that
Listen,
were conditioned didn't want to
You're a
leave.
slave, you're a slave. It doesn't
I
matter.
hear you. No, I got it.
So let me just say this. You look at George Floyd, you look at Eric Garner.
Yeah, sure.
These men were essentially murdered, right? For
Sure.
small,
low
level crimes, right?
George Floyd, his case is much more compelling than the one in Atlanta. Well, Atlanta is excessive force, possibly. I don't think they're going to get a conviction on murder
the
one
New
for
York
that.
one, though, with Eric
Garner,
Garner.
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely, sure.
So
Yep.
the first thing you hear about George Floyd is not where he was at today, is what he did in previous.
Yeah, it wasn't the first thing you heard from him. No, it takes.
You look at
Marvin, listen to me. It takes operation research a couple of weeks to get into modus operandi, to get into the mainstream media. It doesn't happen overnight.
But even Eric Garner,
Yeah.
well, this guy was a criminal.
After George Floyd had been killed had been murdered for 2 weeks, then how many times he's been arrested, holding a gun to be all of that came, but it was not the first
Now,
narrative.
the point I'm making is.
Yeah.
The,
By any stretch of imagination.
The narrative
Yep.
is what his history was, right?
Right.
What his past was. So when you look at
That wasn't the narrative at first. The narrative at first
turned-
was it was a shocking, brutal.
But did
wake-up call.
it turn into that?
Narrative is a strange word. Did it become a side story? Absolutely. Was it right? Probably not.
So the point is, anytime something happens to somebody or something's done, people look at your history, right? We can agree.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about guys like George Washington and all these these quote unquote famous men, is it not okay to look at their history to determine?
Well, we are
right, but to determine how we should view them in whole, not just for the good things they did. So when you look at somebody's history, like Peter just said, if this guy was a great warrior. He was this, but he's a child molester. Where do we draw
Yeah,
the
but
line?
come like that, yeah.
Where do we draw the line?
Obviously,
You know what
I mean, let's not dumb it down. Let's not dumb the argument down that
I mean-
bad. You're better than that, Marvin.
All right.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
We work together. Me
Sure.
and Marvin work
I hear
together.
you.
When you talk about George Floyd at work, the first thing that anybody says that's not me or Marvin
Or me.
and stuff or
Okay,
you,
yeah.
but most of the I mean I work with all the guys he works with and all the guys I work with, ex law enforcement officers, ex law enforcement. First thing they say, George Floyd pretty much deserved it because he was a bad person.
Or he engaged in a criminal activity
yes.
by trying to.
Yeah, but you're working with ex-cops, and you're
but
guys who want to be cops.
but they're men.
I mean, what do you
They're-
expect? It's the blue line. They're not going to talk about their brother because they see themselves as brothers. They see themselves as fat brothers. And that's my whole point. Until the rank and file are changed willingly or made to change, you're going to have these jerk-offs working security, saying that poor bastard deserved to die.
You don't even have to go to that extreme. You can just look at the Rodney King video and take a step back. The country was not in agreement that was excessive force.
No, the country,
not just
yeah,
law
that was
enforcement.
because the country
But
was
then,
agreement.
Then how did he get off? How did they get acquitted the first time?
Because, like you said before, the manual, okay? They hid behind the manual. They had better lawyers, okay? They attacked it. They attacked aggressively, okay? And, the trial was in Simi Valley.
But the most people that I talked to and heard talking about that particular case.
Well, we don't share the same experience.
No,
We
they
only
said,
live 50 miles apart.
They said, well, what did he do before that? He was driving extremely fast. He was drunk. He was resisting.
That PCP.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's the
Sure.
you look
Sure.
at the result rather than the cause.
In any argument, you're going to have proponents doing opposition research and look into it like that. And that's my whole point. There isn't a guy walking around, okay, that on their worst day is something that they're proud of. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Okay? And the more we keep trying to chase that and sanitizing, hey, you want to take a thing down about Columbus, go ahead. The Italians, they'll get over it, okay? But when you start talking about Thomas Jefferson, you start talking about George Washington, and you start talking about the founding fathers of this country, although they were flawed, okay, they had unbelievable courage to take on the greatest ruling empire the sun never set on the British Empire. And they suffered, and they didn't have the resources, they didn't have the monies, and sometimes they didn't have the support. There was many Tories that infiltrated them and did it. What are we going to do? What are we going to do?
There's many great generals that we celebrate throughout the world that were great generals and awful men.
Sure, yeah.
Awful
George
men.
Patton.
Awful men.
Sure.
I don't think that we should be celebrating them with a statue of them and everything. When we could
So you
celebrate
want to take
them,
down the Washington Monument, Pete?
I'd rather take it down
Really?
if it's offensive.
Really?
to
So
people.
you want to take down the Lincoln Memorial, who he wasn't perfect either, okay? Who had racial undertones, Lincoln, without question. If you do the research, so you want to take down the Washington Monument, you want to take down Ben Franklin stuff, you want to take down Thomas Jefferson's. And what do you want to do?
Okay,
I'll replace them with people that have replace them with
Pete,
people
stop.
that are of good character.
Yeah,
Where's
I hear you.
the other side? Where's the Malcolm X statue?
But build them.
Where's the
Build
Martin
them.
Luther King
Build them.
statue? Where's
Build
the
it.
Medgar Evers
Build
statue?
it. Build it.
But we haven't.
Absolutely. Let's do it. Let's do it. I mean, I think there's a Martin Luther King Boulevard in every city and major city and urban center in the country. Let's build him a statue. Okay? Let's build the statue for the civil rights advocates. Let's do it. Let's have a thing in Washington DC about the Rainbow Coalition and remember the history and the origins of the race fight. Let's grab that bridge from Selma and put it in the National Institute of American History. Okay, alongside Washington going over the thing. Let's build it. Let's embrace all that history. I'm not saying just keep white history. I'm saying let's embrace it all because it is our history.
Yeah, but it's.
I mean, you guys talking about taking down a Washington Monument? It's crazy.
No, I didn't say that.
Yeah, you did.
No, I just said I don't think we should have statues of anybody. Period.
Okay, but we do.
We do.
But we do.
But why?
Because he was the first president of the United States. Okay. And it was the general that led us to victory and created the United States of America.
He didn't create the United States of America. But anyway, why?
Okay, no. He got our independence. Yes, he did create the United States of America. Because we were a British colony before this.
Right.
So yes, he did. So tell me who did then. No, talk about. We're here talking.
My point is, I don't think we should be erecting statues of men who why are we still worshiping these guys who they're people that have lived lives after George Washington and all these other men who've done really great things, and continue to do great things. Let's just focus on those people and what they're trying to do in the movements they're making now. I'm not saying erase history, but do I need to see George Washington's on the dollar bill? He's on, they got a monument. Do I need to see that?
Martin Luther King Day. It's a national holiday.
You don't see
there should be a national holiday for Muhammad Ali.
What about?
They should, and I argued that on the radio for the last 17 years.
What about?
Again.
What about a bill with Martin Luther King's name picture?
Sure,
on it?
I'm all for it.
I mean,
I'm all for it.
I'm just not into people worship at all. Anyway,
well,
yeah,
that's just not my thing.
Yeah, but we're not talking about people. We're not talking about people worshiping Michael Jordan and paying $400 for sneakers who could give two shits about any poor kid that he comes across, has no history of charity, has no history of social conscience or social justice whatsoever. Muhammad Ali did. Bill Russell did. Jim Brown, for all his flaws and all his character deficiencies, okay, he had it as well, okay. So let's. I mean, Jim Brown is a great civil rights activist. But if you look at him as a human being and you looked at him on paper, you would say he's a bum. Okay, but I don't believe him to be a bum.
But there's no statue.
I would say.
Oh yeah, there is. There's a statue of Kid in the Hall of Fame.
I would have
football. Okay, there's a few statues of Jim Brown. There's a few in Cleveland. There's a few in L.A. You're wrong. There are.
Not a national monument.
Okay, but doesn't deserve to have a national monument. But he should have his own.
How about we take the Confederate ones down first? The ones that wanted slavery to continue. The ones that said they wanted to secede from the United States. They lost.
Sure.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
They lost.
Yeah.
And why should we be putting monuments of them all around the southern states? They lost. You know what I mean? Just like the flag. They lost.
You don't think
it's not like people like in Germany they're adopting the American flag
because in order to bring the country back together, okay, we had to make certain concessions. And our behavior after the Civil War, Pete, if you really know your history, was just as despicable as some of the Confederates' intentions to leave this country.
But do you realize
nobody holds the moral high ground?
Do you realize
when it comes to a conflict like that?
That most of those monuments, almost 80% of the monuments were after World War I. Were erected after World War I. Yeah. That's pretty much 50 years later.
Sure. Listen to me. Let me get this. Let me be very clear. I do not believe that the Confederate flag or any monument to somebody related to the Civil War from the Confederacy should be on any public or state property. Period. It does not belong there. Do I want the ones that are up? Should some conservative think tank or some benefactor or some historical society maybe grab this land where it could be part of the teachings of the Civil War and World War I and World War II and everything combined? You got it.
A lot of the southern states are taking those monuments and putting them in museums.
Yes.
They're not destroying them.
Yeah.
They're putting them in museums where they belong.
Sure.
And I would rather have,
we're gonna have a tough time putting a Washington Monument in a museum, though. We'd have to get the Astrodome.
Listen. He was the first president of the United States. Keep it there, but let it be known. Hey, sure. you could put a subplaque on the side of it.
Let me ask you a question, right? What was the first free society that didn't use slaves and slave labor to build themselves up? Tell me one I got it right. Tell me when I got it right.
I'd have to look into that. I don't know the answer to that right
now. I know the answer. There's none.
Okay.
Colonization, exploration came on the indigenous people and people of less social standing being abused and taken advantage of time and time again. Okay?
Yeah, everything most of the times I've read, it's slavery comes from you defeating another tribe. You know, and most of the tribes, once you defeat that tribe,
Indians in this country took their tribal wars and took some of their women slaves. You know what I mean? We have a bad history. Okay, history's written by the winners. Okay?
Right.
Okay? You know, we have a bad history of demonizing the people that we beat in war. Okay? And it's not just our history; it's any history.
That's the spoils of victory, yo.
That's yeah.
I just.
But it doesn't make it right.
I'm not saying it makes it right, but
It doesn't make it right for Sherman to burn Atlanta down to the ground. It didn't. It didn't make it right for soldiers to rape and pillage, Southern Confederate villages. War is ugly. War is nasty. War is it brings out the absolute worst.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay.
But just like you say, just like we were talking
about in this country
right
now.
Sure.
War on this.
We've had a race war going on in this country. I mean, since the riots in the markets in Charleston, South Carolina, which I believe was the first real rebellion of the slave community. This is America's black eye.
The only way to defeat hate is what I said from the beginning. Is with love. That's it.
and unity.
But how do we get there, though?
You got to change your mindset. It starts with each individual themselves. You change the narrative of what you think and how you feel for yourself. You can't. I can't control what Mike thinks. I can't control what Peter thinks. I can control what I think and what I do.
Sure. And what will you do? What will that be?
Say again.
What will that be? Do you have any children?
Yes.
If you have your children in front of the Washington Monument or in front of Thomas Jefferson's memorial or whatever, what are you gonna tell them? Say, Dad, what's up with this man George? Because in school he's taught that he's a hero.
Well, we wouldn't be there.
You wouldn't be there?
No.
If it was me, I'd be there. But I'd explain to my child and everything, which is Naya's the only one that I can explain this to. If we were sitting there, he was the first president of the United States. He won the Revolutionary War for the United States.
Yeah.
He did all these things, but he did own 128 slaves.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely,
he did own 128 slaves, and he that was his time.
Sure.
Most of people, they were under a different oppression. You know what I mean? That in their day.
Yeah.
So they said they were oppressed by England. So that's the reason why they wanted to
Sure.
to rebel.
And when we came here, we oppressed the Indians.
Yes.
And it goes on and on and on. Let me ask you a question. Give me a white person of. How about the JFK or the Bobby Kennedy Memorial? What would you tell your children at that?
Again, I'm not one to.
Sure.
I wouldn't be.
Well, if they ask you a question about JFK or Bobby Kennedy, who contributed to the civil rights movement, who stopped J. Edgar Hoover from framing for planting cocaine and planting prostitutes with drugs on them in his company, if you research that, was JFK as aggressive as he should have been? You also have to worry about getting elected, because if he doesn't get elected, none of it happens. Was Bobby a little more aggressive? Yes. But they protected Martin Luther King from J. Edgar Hoover without question. And his sick, twisted. Now, if you want to take a building down, you take the J. Edgar Hoover FBI building.
Oh yeah.
That was a bad man. What?
They all had the same fate, did they not? Bobby Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King. They all had the same fate. They were all murdered, correct?
Sure. Yeah. But. Yeah.
So for all the good that they did, what was the end result
they
of
were,
all that good that they did?
They were a threat.
Yeah, but I don't think I know with the Kennedys that there was no racial component in why they were killed.
They were a threat. They were a threat to
the way things.
I mean, if you look at the threats that were researched about the Kennedys, it was much more of a communism type flair or a mafia type thing than all you had to do was look out your window in the 60s and understand that the country was ready for some type of change. Was it the change that we probably should have got? No. But sometimes moving change like that moves a little slow. But I think it was more, I don't believe in the conspiracies. I think that Bobby Kennedy was the Attorney General. And I have a brother that I love. And I know he loved his brother, and he was his brother's most trusted advisor. And if there was some type of conspiracy that killed JFK, I think he would have got to the bottom of it.
Yes, I believe so.
I mean, I believe that nobody's going to tell me, okay, if I have a brother that's a senator, another brother that's about to be senator, that you're going to look at American Republican and lie to him just to keep this whole thing moving. It ain't happening with me. Okay. There's a problem with Bubba Wallace in NASCAR. Okay? Guy comes in, finds a noose in his garage. Weeks before this, NASCAR takes a brave step, a right step, and a correct step. And you're right. It was probably done by corporate pressure. Okay? To ban the Confederate flag from any NASCAR event, parking lot, inner circle, stands, across the board. It's banned.
How long has it been there?
Long time, probably. Well, no. It wasn't. We're not talking about it being sanctioned by NASCAR.
No, but how long you said?
You're not allowed to bring in any Confederate flags. NASCAR has no sponsored Confederate flags or anything like that.
So they were allowing people to walk in with
with t-shirts, with shirts, with shirts. You know, if you're in Alabama. If you know anything about Southern culture, if you're an Alabama fan, you're roll tide in whether you're walking into church or walking into NASCAR.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a different dynamic down there. You know what I mean? So, but have they turned the other cheek for that kind of flag to one? Have they been too close to it for a long time? Without question. You're talking about the bastion. We're talking about the Confederacy. NASCAR and its roots are the bastion of the Confederacy. But... and
the change only came after this guy became a NASCAR driver.
No,
it's just recently because of all the change that's been going on in the United States.
No. There was no sanctioned Confederate flags.
No, but a change in terms of.
But there were
race tracks that had them.
Right.
And they
had them
took them
flying.
down. That were privately owned. That would take. And like I said, they were too comfortable with that for a long time. So you're right that they're. The essential point that you're trying to make is they are way too comfortable being that close to that.
Bubba Wallace came out on TV and he did an ad talking about Black Lives Matter and about the Confederate flag.
Bubba Wallace is the only African American race car driver in NASCAR.
Yes, and that's what my point is. It took him to be a part of NASCAR for them to actually take a look and protest.
There were others.
Yeah.
There were other black NASCAR drivers, but it wasn't to the same effect that we're getting now. Gotcha. Nobody spoke out against that. Against the Confederate flag. Right. Bubba Wallace spoke out against the Confederate flag.
He's a very socially conscious athlete who happens to be more famous because he is a person of color in a sport that's dominated by white males. You know what I mean?
Like ice hockey.
Which makes him very important. Not even much more severe than ice hockey.
Oh, yeah.
Like ice hockey used to be 40, 50 years ago. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the, there are still counties down. We're talking about Cobb County. We're talking about places where NASCAR is king. And, you don't want to be a person of color ever in those places. And I've seen those unenlightened counties in my experience in North Carolina, in South Carolina, in Georgia with my college friends. But I've also seen the amazing revitalization of Atlanta led by black entrepreneurs, male and female, and Coca-Cola and jobs and the Olympics and all that is great. I learned a lot from being down south. Okay? And I think that you need that type of perspective in life, period. How other people live, what other people value, why do they value it? I think the more educated, the more informed we get about the United States of America and the types of people and families living in it, I think it can only help us. Right now, I think we're the divided states of America.
That's been that way for a long time.
I think we're divided to an extent. I think we're getting better. I think we're unifying, a lot more people unifying, and by listening to our president being the divider in chief that he is also helping the cause. He's not helping the cause to divide us even more. Sure. He's bringing us closer together.
But division in war is big business. It's profitable. So it's profitable thing to keep people at odds with each other. Somebody's making a great deal of money off of that division. So there's really no incentive.
So you think there's a power at be some dark, evil CIA type force that are pitting people against one another?
I don't think you'd have to go that far. I mean, you
So tell me who's doing
I
it.
just think it's just a narrative that's put out in movies and just the teaching and the upbringing of people itself that creates that division. I don't think you have to go deep into these secret. I don't think
It's getting much better. I mean, you guys, we're the same age. Mike, you're right around the corner from us.
Yeah.
Listen, I've never ever seen as many commercials with African American and mixed couples, gay couples, just the commercials and the movies and the starring roles.
It's almost too politically sanitized. It almost gets corny.
But it's not.
I know, but
it's
here.
not corny because that's our reality.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. If this was Sweden or if this was Scandinavia, then I could say, hey, that's kind of corny and everything you're doing this. But even in Europe,
Actually, Sweden's very enlightened when it comes
that's
to
right.
legislation.
Even in Europe,
You know the Premier League teams have Black
Right.
Lives Matter on the Premier
Exactly.
soccer teams have Black Lives Matter on their jerseys?
even in Europe,
Sure.
in some of those Scandinavian countries, some of these like Amsterdam, all that stuff. If you're from Amsterdam, they don't say that you're black or you're like we say we're African American.
Yeah.
They don't say you're a black person from the Netherlands or something like that. They say that they're Netherlands. Right.
What is the proper? And I struggled with this not too long ago with Asians, right? When say, how do you like? You don't want to call up Puerto Rican, Dominican. Oh, that's the same thing. That's the height of ignorance. You know what I mean? So I asked a few people that I knew in the Asian community, so, like, what do you want to be called? Like, what is the political correct, classification, for a better lack of a word you want to call it? What do black men and people want to be called? African American? Do they want to be called black? Do they want to be called brown? Do they want to be? I mean, what do they want to be called?
I don't know about them. I just like to be called a man. I don't like to put the.
Well, there are some things, right? Like that people find offensive.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, what would you prefer if you're teaching? If you don't want to call a boy what that cop did, that's for sure. You know what I mean? You don't want to call him. You know what I mean? You certainly don't want to call me N-word,
Right.
even though it's it's turned into more of a term of endearment. Than not for me either, but we both know the reality of it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So like what is like help us out there?
I personally don't think black or white are races. They're social statuses in this country.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you hear that, it automatically you think one certain way or another certain way. It's almost like somebody saying what religious organization they belong to.
Sure.
You kind of get an idea what kind of person they are. But I think those are social statuses, not races. There's no such thing as black or white people.
But the reality is we check the box, which sucks.
Because that's what they give us.
Maybe the side is removing that box.
Exactly, that's what they give us. They
You know what I mean?
They classify.
But I'm trying to keep it down the middle here. I'm trying to play to it, okay? So you get, let's say, sports training today. I remember one kid, he'll tell you mid-career, started with one client, now he's got 100, okay? Let's say the genre of the day is white people who want to be better and be more informed of what upsets, what makes them angry, so they can teach their children better. So you have their attention and they're listening to you. What do you talk about as far as how we want to be treated? What do we want to be called? Because an Irishman doesn't want to be called a Mick. A Portuguese guy don't want to be called a greenhorn.
But they don't mind being called an Irishman or a Portuguese man.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But the problem is, Mike, when you take a people and you take away their culture, you take away their history, you change their names.
Yeah.
They don't know where they came from or who they are, and that was the whole idea of keeping people enslaved and uneducated. So you never know your roots and where you came from.
Yeah.
So people in this country don't understand their history because it's been taken away from them. So until we as a whole do a background check on ourselves and find out where our roots come from, then we can't really say.
Do you think there'll ever be a return of the African American or American black family to Africa?
No, because we don't have no roots there.
But if the roots, the only roots we really have, I mean.
Well, they call Africa the motherland for a reason. Everybody came from Africa, right?
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah.
So we all might as well get on the boat and go over there. You know, your family, my family, all of our family. We might as well go
That's
there.
what they call it the motherland.
My family, they go to Ireland.
Yeah,
Pick some potatoes or do what they do over there.
I understand, and
Yeah.
you know what I think honestly.
What?
Honestly, me and Marv were sitting at my house a little while ago, and we were just looking at the top 100 inventions by African Americans.
Right.
Yeah, one guy was from Forever.
Yeah. And,
You know that?
And you listen. You never learn that in your textbooks.
Sure, but
know-
listen, but this is what I talked about, guys. I asked you guys the question, where does the real change from? I have education here. And one of the biggest thing was, every young black person in Massachusetts should know that some of the greatest tools were invented by a black man from Forever.
Yes, I understand that, but
Yeah,
we don't write the textbooks. You know, the textbooks don't come from.
I asked you guys, does it come from reparations? Does it come from legislation? Or does it come from education? Does it come from laws?
Out of all of those things,
Yeah.
I'd have to say education would
So
be
would I.
the front
Education
of
is
the
it.
line.
Education is
because
100%.
knowledge is power.
Right.
And without it, you don't.
Let's face it, we weren't taught history properly.
Correct.
That I went to. I love my history teachers, but we weren't.
Correct.
We were taught history is written by the winners, unfortunately. But as you progress through high school and into college and you deepen your studies, that's when you go for the deep dive. As you understand how flawed, how flawed people were in all of that. So we got NASCAR, right? We find the news, right? Richard Petty meets him at the racetrack. All the drivers and crew members push his car. They stand as one. While they're doing this, there is a airplane flying around saying, "Let's defund NASCAR" with a Confederate flag on it. There's an airplane driving around the racetrack where all of this good stuff is happening. Yet them good old boys,
They're holding on.
they don't want to let go.
They can hold on. They can spend their money like that. They can do whatever they want. They have a choice.
But
But they're pissing. They're pissing on something that was real special.
But that's deep-rooted ignorance.
Sure,
You know what I'm saying?
sure, yeah.
That's what that is. And when people...
And what is the topic of the show, Marvin? Can we beat the hate?
With love. That's it.
I hear you.
That's it. It's the only thing.
NASCAR, what do you think about this? Is this going to have staying power, this issue?
It's gonna have staying power.
We're not going to have a Jesse Smollett here, are we?
No.
Oh.
Hey, no, it's gonna stay. It's
right.
gonna stay. The
Yeah.
reason why it's gonna
Because
stay is
that's what
because,
this- yeah.
is because most of the NASCAR pit crews and drivers, and people
white.
are with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
if you had a backlash where half the drivers in NASCAR didn't want to drive anymore because of the Confederate flag, then you would see hey, it's still gonna.
I was, and we saw this first with the gay community. I was told by a big time CEO, having a conversation with him in the airport. He said, "Listen, for big corporations, 2 to 3% is a lot of money, and if one civil rights group or one community like LGBTQ2 or the Rainbow Coalition or this or that can move the odometer 3%." We're going to make sure it don't happen because we're not really ready to lose that. And like he said before, the corporate sponsors, the NASCAR, are leading the good old boys and saying, "Do you want the green? I mean, or do you want the stars and bars? What do you want?"
Let's not forget that these corporations sponsor the NBA athletes.
Sure, yeah.
They sponsor the NFL athletes. They sponsor all sports.
Let's say Jiffy Peanut Butter doesn't react well and doesn't have the social conscious history that maybe the NAACP thinks is fit or the LGBTQ community. If they were to impose a boycott of that, or they were to unleash the dogs in their media context and do what they do, they could move the needle 3, 4, 5, 6, 7%. And no corporate entity today is willing to do that. Like, this country is becoming more diverse.
Oh, yes.
Like I started, we're not getting any more white, okay? You know, you know, the 2.5 kids in a picket house in a white family, those days, they're going to be the minority. It's not going to be the norm anymore, surely. But let me ask you a question, okay? And we talked about this off the air, and then we'll wrap up with this. In Canada, Quebec has tried to succeed from Canada 4 or 5 times in the last generation, 100 years. Okay? Are you guys familiar with that at all? About the province of Quebec?
I'm not. I just know that they speak French.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Well, no, they lost, I think the last one was like 52-48. Well, about succession, they wanted to leave Canada. In Spain, you have the Basque in the mountain regions. So we have a lot of countries. Soviet Union was supposed to be the biggest threat, but then they fractured off to 11 different countries, and now none of the countries can stand one another. Belarus, Chechnya, Ukraine, Lithuania. You have towns and communities in China, which my brother played in, that the federal government, and the army can't even go in without risk of losing their life. Is it just reality that people are different and we're never going to be able to bring them together? Because you're never going to be able to bring the Chechnyans and the Russians together. You're never going to be able to bring the Russians and the Ukrainians together. And you might not even be able to bring the French-speaking people of the Quebec province fully together with the rest of the Canadian brothers. These are relatively advanced countries when you talk about Spain, and you talk about Canada, and you talk about the divisions in them. Are they saying, well, United States, welcome to our world? We've been dealing with this type of stuff?
No, because I think that we've been dealing with that a lot longer than them.
Sure.
Just think about it.
Yeah.
Everything you spoke of in all these countries, in all these different places, Quebec, it's just like living down south. You know, when the South tried to secede from the United States, they tried to secede from the United States. It didn't happen.
Yeah,
It
but
didn't
no,
happen.
but this is a peaceful succession, and this is like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I mean, we're talking about current. Like, there are problems, constant problems in Spain with the divisions, whether it's based on religion or geographical areas, and that's not uncommon, you know, in many countries. That's everywhere. So are we chasing Shangri-La that we're never going to get, Marvin?
It's possible. It's possible. I mean, there's a saying that says one nation under God, and we're not under God anymore. So with liberty and justice for all, that doesn't exist. So we're not even adhering to our own standards, that we set. So bringing everybody together is going to be a very difficult thing.
Sure. Can we do it? Is that a bridge too far?
Anything is possible.
How do we get there? Is it going to be a man? Is it going to be the reform of education? Do we have a great leader in us? Because I thought it was Barack Obama. I cried. I thought it was him. And, them people, they dug in. The racist underbelly of this country dug in and said, no, we're not hearing this. He's not from the United States. He's a Bertha, the nonsense. He's a Manchurian candidate. Oh, my God, it's insane.
They blocked every meaningful thing that he could have done for this country. It was blocked through the Senate.
Sure.
Anything meaningful that...
Obamacare.
Obamacare was passed.
And then Trump eliminated that.
No, he tried to.
He tried to. He doesn't have the votes yet, but...
Let's talk about Trump. I think Trump's advisors are telling him to dig in on the race thing, not to budge, okay? Not, to be him, to play to his base. And when you look at the polls, Biden isn't gaining through his advances. He's gaining from Trump's losses.
Yes.
Okay? Is there hope for moderate, reasonable, financially conservative, socially maybe more liberal than for Republicans in this Black Lives Matter social justice movement that is saying, hey, enough is enough? He's too divisive. and he could have been the spot. He might be the spark plug that pissed everybody off.
There are conservative Republicans that have spoke out. And what happened to them?
Few and far between.
What happened to them?
Like shame on John Bolton. I know people making a hero out of John Bolton, but John Bolton should have came out a long time ago.
He should have came out a long time ago.
Yeah.
He should have came out a long time ago. But listen, I'd rather him come out now than after November 3rd.
Of course.
Than after November 3rd. You know what I mean? I'd rather him come out now. The reason why Hillary Clinton lost is because our FBI director came out before the election.
Which is
just before the election. She probably would have won the election if that stuff didn't come out.
So the Russian social media farms had nothing to do with Hillary Clinton.
Oh yeah, well they did, but
Politics
our own FBI said that they had some stuff on Hillary Clinton 2 weeks before.
Yeah.
And all you had to do was have the media tell them.
Yeah, of course.
And we're also coming off of the first black president of the United States, two-term black president.
But let me ask you a question. When you're hearing "Yes, We Can" and you saw the crowd at the inauguration, and you saw the crowd in Chicago when he won, you didn't. I got goosebumps. You didn't feel like we were ready to cross that bridge.
Listen,
you didn't really.
It was a great slogan, But he's not the first to.
He tried. He tried.
What do you think about Barack Obama as a black man, well-educated? Talk to me about him, huh? Talk to me.
I'm not a fan of any politician. I just leave it.
Really? My father was a politician. Politician,
I don't know your
at one point in time, wasn't a dirty word. There's a lot of politicians that helped a lot of people. But now, and we were talking about this at my brother's house today, that his kids, they say, I'd never be a politician. But me and my brother, when I grew up, politics were you couldn't be speech or gossip about a politician, but you were called the honorable. My father's mill would be the Honorable Al Herron, and he was a poor kid from Lone Hill whose family moved here from Alabama, to work in the Firestone mill, which burnt down. What happens? Is LeBron James big enough? Is anybody?
It's bigger than one man. It's
okay.
It's bigger than one individual.
Good, yes.
Because before LeBron James, like we talked about, we had Martin Luther King, Malcolm. You had other guys,
but they were iconic and they left their imprint on history. Did they get everything they wanted? No, but
if they
moved it. They moved it.
Let me ask you this:
yes.
If you think Martin Luther King or Malcolm X is here today, do you think they would see much difference than?
Yes,
you think
absolutely,
so?
sure. We have black entrepreneurs, black billionaires. I'm just looking at the music industry, and it's not a good thing to look at. Or look at, black colleges. Look at
same ones that have been. There's no new black.
But they're much better funded today.
Okay.
Let me tell you something. Their alumni endowments today are much different than they were in the 1960s.
Because it wasn't one of the major black colleges supposed to be closing because they don't have the money.
Well, some of them, But listen, I North Carolina. I went to step shows. These kids walked around like they were going to Harvard and Yale, as proud as a peacock. They're going to black colleges. North Carolina A&T. Morehouse.
You watch the battle.
Howard,
you watch the battle of the bands. You see how much pride they have in it.
Yeah.
You see.
And they're talking about athletes, big time recruits now. The third highest ranked basketball in the world, high school player in a country now. They're talking about. He's talking about going to a black college. I think that'd be great. If we want to talk about people taking advantage of African Americans, look no further than the NCAA.
Right.
They've been doing it for a long time. Right. And I've been a minority in that locker room. Now, how many white boys walking around, 20 years ago, in the Big East?
Exactly. And speaking of that, how many African American coaches are there out there?
No.
In the NBA, in the NCAA, in all of sports.
Sure.
If you have the NFL that has 80% African American, and you only have four full-time head coaches in the league.
The Rooney Rule is being ignored, which gets back to his thing: policy versus reality, right? So maybe the lesson of the day says that maybe we had to put some punitive teeth in policy.
Listen, don't sleep on.
You got to give solutions, my man. You can't just throw cocktails and fires. I need solutions. I thought that you would appreciate that. That when you talked about policy and reality,
Right.
but maybe if we give teeth to the policy, maybe like they're talking about officers that get written up to make it public.
Accountability, yeah.
You know what I mean, maybe we need some accountability in that. What do you want to talk to that I haven't talked about yet? Your guess. We've been going at it pretty good. Okay, we've been on for an hour and 37 minutes. What do you want to talk about that I haven't?
I'll give Pete the floor.
No, we got you with the form on it. You got $1 million smile. You're a smart guy. You're a cool dude.
I think we covered all the things that I anticipated covering today.
Okay. Well, tell me something as a white podcast host that I can get better at. Tell me something that I need to pay more attention to. Give me what's important in your world, in being a black father in this country. Yeah.
It sounds like you're well traveled.
Sure.
It sounds like you've been around a lot of different ethnic groups.
Sure.
So, and I think today you've done an awesome job. So I don't think, from one time being here that
Sure.
I'm in a position to give you advice.
Because I want to get better.
I'll tell you.
What?
I'll tell you. You're one of the biggest names in this city.
Yeah.
You and your brother.
Yeah, sure.
Pretty much,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
Pretty much, and everything. You do this podcast here. Maybe we need to do something more. We need to.
I only ran a predominantly African American basketball league for 9 years with no funding, called the Blacktop League.
Right.
And we send people of color to treatment all the time for free, as you know.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think the Henry family's done enough, Pete. I think
I'm not talking about.
All
Talking about that.
All
I mean, you said what you do.
Yeah,
what you
sure.
do is everything. Maybe go see some of these, and bring some of these other, civil rights activists,
Sure.
and maybe not just me and Marvin, but the guys that are really on the front lines.
We've invited Derek Baptiste from the Bedford City Council. I talked to B-Mag. We have some. I've talked to Lamont Ferguson. Listen, one thing you know about me, Peter. Have you ever heard me deny a guest who wants to come on?
No, you
From
you
time
asked
to
me.
here.
You said get him in here.
Get him
and
on.
Get him in here.
No. I'm going to take shit tonight because I didn't have a white conservative firebrand there. Because if you really want to be monkeys and be led around by how corporate media does things, okay, then it's not complete. Because we need a big fat white woman with like 4 teeth in her mouth and a Trump hat on, and then we need a conservative in a bow tie for another one.
Mike,
and then we'll have like our oppression.
That'd be awesome.
Sure.
Mike, I had a conservative, a guy that I believe is conservative.
Yeah.
You know him. I won't mention his name because he's not on to defend himself. Or anything. But I asked him that question. Would you come on and speak about black and white issues and things? And he was like, no, absolutely not. And I said, well, you can say all this stuff on Facebook.
Yeah.
Facebook. And text me back and forth on Facebook.
Yeah.
But to sit across
Spend
from
6 hours on Facebook
Yes,
talking
spend 6
to
hours
morons.
but you
or
can't,
trying to do an intelligent
because
thing.
you know what it is, Mike?
What?
They don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to debate the truth. They just want to hear themselves.
They're dug in.
Yeah, they just want to hear themselves, or they want to hear the people that agree with them.
And I want to be clear that your people that you go home to who are watching this, and your people that you go home that you watch this, before this started, I told you guys where I'd have to be. The Mike Herron is much closer to politics to Peter Silver than some people would say by watching tonight's show.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But we can't all come here and sing Kumbaya and do it because that's just not how it works. You understand?
Because just like we just said, we don't want to just have people that listen to us because they agree with us.
We don't need an echo chamber. I mean,
right.
we want it. And let me tell you something. The more we talk about it and the more we have difficult conversations, it's better. But with the education thing, I'm right with you because we need to have that difficult conversation in 5th grade. Mm-hmm. We need to have that difficult conversation in 7th grade. We need to have a difficult conversation in, this. And talk about how with the Chinese building the railroad and the slave labor, prompting states up financially for, generations upon generations. We need to have those conversations. At college, I think it's too late.
Could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
We were talking earlier. You said there was an African American that was an inventor from
Yeah.
in Fall River.
Yeah.
Do they have any memorials
They
for
should.
him?
So let's start
For him?
there.
Let's start there.
I mean you.
Yeah, brother.
All right,
Let's
right
start
on.
right there.
Right on.
And that's
I think
United
I'm
States
going
history.
to be freed up from my legal issue. You know what I mean? Soon. So we'll have some liberty to go get
bro.
aggressive. That's a pledge to you. We'll raise the money right out of here.
That's right.
We'll raise the money right out of here.
And
I got to
if-
find out his name. Peter Cohen. Peter Cohen, if you listen, tell me the guy. We got to find it. But it's been in the post. But apparently, he was a tool maker. And he made a few tools that are still in existence today.
Wow.
Probably didn't get paid. Well, what he should have.
Or somebody else probably stole his patent. Somebody stole his patent. like Thomas Edison.
Anything else? Are you going to come back?
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you for
Awesome, awesome. I am the Hurricane. We gave you an hour and 42 minutes.
Boom.
Listen, love one another.
That's right.
Love one another. Ask the top simple questions. Try to get better. We need to do a better job of teaching our history. I don't want it sanitized. But I don't want the Confederate flag on federal estate-owned property either. Okay? I don't want to erase General Lee from the history books. But I want his story to be told, like Peter told today, that he said there should be no Confederate flag. There should be no allegiance to it. We lost. That's how it goes. It's a complicated web we weave in, and very difficult to unravel history. But the history that we should be most worried about is what we're going to do tomorrow. Because when tomorrow becomes yesterday, we got to get better. I am the Hurricane for my man Pete, my man Marvin. Black and white and what is right. I don't know if we brought it any closer to it, but we tried. Peace. We're out.
Podcast City.
Get on it.
Podcast City.
Get on it.